You also have the ability to sample all layers as well. And then the auto enhance, basically it tries to fine tune those edges and clean it up as best as possible with auto enhance on. You also have the refine edge adjustment next to it here. If we click on that, this basically shows us an isolated view of our selection and allows us to make adjustments to fine tune our selection. Basically radius, let me put everything at 0 here. Radius tries to basically smooth out the edges around the edges of your selection. Contrast, a lot of times when you smooth out the edges, it softens them. Contrast just increases the contrast of those edges. I'm going to put on a black so we can see it a little bit better. And we'll zoom in here. So with the radius, you can see that the radius softened the edges a bit, and then the contrast just increased the contrast of those edges, so they weren't soft. So with the combination of these two options, the edges ended up being a little bit smoother. And then you have the smooth function, which tries to take all the little points in here. If you look at the edges, some of the edges are kind of rough, and then it tries to smooth those out. So you can see that now the edges are a lot smoother. We don't have all those little jagged edges. Depending on what you're doing, this might not be the best thing to do. A lot of times having those rough edges make it a little bit more organic, so you have to weigh that out. You also have the feathering option, which also basically softens the edges, and it works similar to the feather function under the selection tools, except that you're feathering the whole selection and not individual parts of the selection. And then you have contract and expand that do exactly what they say. If we expand it, it's going to grow the selection, and then contract it, it's going to contract the selection. This can be very handy, especially when you're trying to cut somebody out of from like a white background, and you're putting them on a different background. You notice that they have a little bit of like a white halo around them. Usually a little bit of the contract there will contract the selection and remove a lot of those that white haloing around the image. Okay, so I'm just gonna hit OK. Okay, and those are the selection tools. Now there's another way to select parts of an image, and that's through color range. So if you go into the select menu and click on color range, and you sample an area, just click on an area of the image, it tries to select anything that's related, any colors that are related to that image here. And if you hold the shift key down, you can actually add to that selection. If your shift key works, let me see. Here we go. So I noticed it picked up this triangle on the umbrella here, this orange, but didn't pick up the orange over here. So if I shift click on that, then I can pick up more of that orange. You have a fuzziness slider up top, and the fuzziness slider allows you to, it's basically like a tolerance. Usually what I do, I'll drag it all the way to the left, and I'll bring it to the right until I see it starting to pick up more of the image than I want. Right now it's doing a pretty good job, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, so now we see that it's picking up part of the sand and maybe some of this magenta triangle in the umbrella, so I'm going to back off it a little bit and then hit OK. And then you have a pretty decent selection. It's usually pretty good. Now when working with the color range, you can isolate it to only pick up parts of an image. So if I deselect here, if you start off with your let's say polygonal lasso tool, and I'll select this yellow triangle here. Actually, I'll select half of the yellow triangle with a real rough selection here. Okay, And then I'll go to select color range, and if I select that yellow, it's only going to eventually select what's in between those. So it's going to select whatever intersects my original selection and what I pick in my color range. So it's a good way to make detailed compound selections there. So now the end result is just yellow, but it's like the top half of the yellow triangle. So it's a good way to isolate your selections. Under the select menu, you have a few options. We have select all, which selects the whole image. Deselect, obviously deselects your selection. Select inverse. So right now I have that yellow part of the yellow triangle selected. So if I hit select inverse, it's going to invert that selection. So if I look at the bottom edge here, I can see that it's selecting basically everything but that yellow triangle. So I'm going to inverse again. It's going to again select the yellow triangle. We also have color range, which we already used. Refine edge, which I showed you earlier. It's this tool. And then we have modify. We have a modify function. We have border, which can be handy if you're doing some graphic effects. Basically, it takes your selection and whatever pixel width you put, we'll put 4 is fine. We'll hit OK. Actually, 4 was kind of small, so we didn't see it very good. But what it did is it turned the selection into a border. So it's very subtle, but it's it can be handy for if you're doing any graphics in Photoshop, and you need to create a border around something. You can use the select modify border to create that border. We also have modify. We have smooth, which basically smooths out all angled areas or rough areas in the image. And if I put 5 pixels here, wow, 5 was way too much. 5 was way too much, mainly because of the size of the selection was so small, because it's only selecting that border there. So I'm going to go back to modify, and I'm going to hit expand, and we'll expand it by we'll put 50. So now we have a big, thick selection there. Now if I go to select, modify, smooth, and we'll use 5, basically what it does is just rounds off these corners or any rough edges, any small edges. Anything smaller than basically 5 pixels, it rounds it off. We also have contract, which if I can contract by 20 pixels, you'll see that the selection gets smaller or narrower. And then again you have your feather command. We also have grow. What grow is like is kind of like the tolerance setting in Magic Wand. So if I hit grow, it picks up any surrounding colors that are similar to what's already selected. And then we also have similar. Now grow is like tolerance with the contiguous set, so it's only going to pick anything that's right next to those colors. Now if we hit similar, it's going to pick anything in the image. It's going to select anything in the image that's similar to those colors. So as we see, we have some green selected here. So I'd imagine if when we hit similar, it's going to select this green over here and probably this yellow over there. So let's try it. We'll select similar, and yeah, it picked up a lot of that yellow and none of the green. And I think it didn't pick up any of the green because that green is a muter green. It's less saturated, and the tone is a little lighter than what we currently have selected. So it does try to kind of stay within those tonal range and color range there.